Karl Marx, unfortunately, is not one of the infamous Marx brothers. Indeed, good old Karl's work, while undeniably interesting, never seems to depart from complete seriousness. You never hear Karl Marx say, "These are my principles. If you don't like them, I have others." But while Karl is undeniably dissimilar to the other more famous Marxes, this is not a reason to relegate him to the great mass of unentertaining and so ignorable individuals. Indeed, Karl Marx cannot be ignored. This is because, perhaps more than any other philosopher, and perhaps even more than any other single individual, Marx has been instrumental to the development of 20th century politics. His ideas have been used by communists, socialists, and leftists, by academics, politicians, and revolutionaries. And while for the most part this use has been a form of misuse, this makes it all the more important for us to understand Marx on his own terms. Let's begin. In our readings for today, Marx makes two main arguments. The first of these is historical, the second ethical. Let's look into the historical argument first. Marx begins this argument with the observation that throughout all of history, class struggle has been absolutely central. He points to Roman society, in which there were classes of centurions, emperors, gladiators, and the like. In medieval times, on the other hand, the classes were kings, knights, monks, and peasants, and so on. Now, you should notice that insofar as these are examples of class struggle, Marx can't be referring to actual physical struggle. Indeed, for the most part, gladiators did not challenge emperors, peasants did not revolt against kings. By saying that class struggle is central to history, Marx thus simply means that society has always ranked human beings unequally, thus throwing groups into opposition. While peasants and kings may not have fought often, they were certainly opposed to each other in terms of resources, power, and the like. Okay, so class struggle has been at the center of all history. This continues, according to Marx, today. However, Marx continues, in modern capitalist society, things have gotten simpler than in previous times. While in the past there have typically been many classes, today there are only two. The first of these, the ruling bourgeois, is the class of capitalists, or we could say the class of owners and employers. The second class is that of the ruled proletariat, the class of workers. We see the struggle between these two classes all around us, Marx points out, in the formation of unions, the connection of big businesses to government, strikes, and so on. But the thing about modern society and its variety of class struggle, Marx continues, is that it is doomed to failure. This is so for a number of reasons, but if we are going to consider, this is so for a number of reasons, but we are only going to consider one for now. Namely, think about how in modern society there are always going to be more proletariat than bourgeois, more employees than employers. Now, as we have seen in this division of classes, the bourgeois are the rulers, the proletariats are the ruled. But as all of us know, people don't like other people telling them what to do. Therefore, Marx predicts, the majority, the proletariat, is eventually going to get sick of being ruled and revolt against their employers, against the bourgeois. Once this happens, the proletariat will be the rulers, leaving the bourgeois class with no place in society. If the employees have refused to continue being employees after all, there is nothing left for employers to do. Therefore, after the revolt, after the revolution, there will be only one class left, the class of the proletariat. And a society with one class is, of course, a classless one. With this rather triumphant and hopeful prediction, Marx has completed his first argument. To repeat the whole thing again in brief, Marx believes that modern society is marked by class struggle between bourgeois and proletariat that will eventually end with a proletariat revolution, resulting in a classless society. Now, the thing to notice about this argument is that it is completely historical and not at all ethical. There's nothing in the argument, in other words, about the good life or how to achieve it. However, Marx does make an ethical argument in our reading for today. Indeed, Marx has a very specific idea of what the good life is, what must be done to achieve it, and how all this connects to his historical observations about class struggle. But before we can investigate such grand connections, we first have to understand Marx's idea of the good life. Now, Marx's view of the good life is incredibly different from anything else we have encountered this semester. This is so for a number of reasons. First, Marx, unlike most of the other philosophers we have read this semester, believes that humans are not first and foremost thinking beings, but rather that we are material beings. To put it differently, Marx thinks that humans are bodies before they are minds. Second, in opposition to the other philosophers we have been reading, Marx believes that humans are not first and foremost individual beings, but social beings. In other words, Marx thinks that we have to think about humans and the good life on the level of society, rather than on the level of the individual. These two convictions thus form the base of Marx's conception of the good life. Indeed, Marx reasons, if humans are fundamentally social and material beings, then the good life is ultimately laboring creatively alongside our fellow humans. Now, Marx points out there are at least three things that make up this good life, three things that go into a life where we labor creatively alongside our fellow humans. First, in such a life, we find our individual self-identity in our labor. The individual human, in other words, knows who she is because she knows she is a laborer. Second, in such a life, humans are connected to each other in their common identity as laborers. We all understand each other because we all realize we are all laborers. Third, in a life where humans labor creatively alongside each other, humans are connected to nature through their labor upon it. To put it differently, since whenever I am laboring, whether it is on a shirt, a meal, or a new chair, I am working in and on the natural world, it is ultimately through labor that I am connected to nature. This then, for Marx at least, is the good life, laboring creatively in nature with other humans, and through this, finding our self-identity and a connection to both each other and to nature. However, Marx continues, modern society makes this good life impossible for the vast majority of people, namely for the proletariat, the workers. To see why Marx thinks this is the case, you have to keep in mind that the proletariat is defined as an employee. The proletariat, by definition, is someone who works for someone else. This means, Marx points out, that the proletariat lives by selling his labor. Now, this is admittedly a weird way to think about this, but it is, as far as I can see, completely accurate. Indeed, if I go to Target and if I go and get a job at Target, what I am doing is selling my labor to Target. They pay me for it, just as I would pay them for a DVD I buy. Now, continues Marx, because the proletariat by definition is one who sells her own labor, what this means is that the proletariat, by definition, does not own her own labor. Again, this might sound confusing, but just think again in terms of the DVD example. If Target sells me a DVD, it means that they no longer own it. In the exact same way, if I sell my labor to Target, I no longer own it. Now, this is hugely problematic for Marx, for if someone does not own his own labor, he cannot live the good life. First of all, remember that part of living the good life is finding your self-identity and your status as laborer. Well, if you don't own your own labor, there goes self-identity. Second, part of living Marx's good life is being connected to other humans in our common identity as laborers. Well, if none of us own our own labor, there goes any chance of connecting with each other. Last, remember that for Marx, part of the good life is being connected to nature through our labor. But if this labor isn't ours, then any chance of really connecting with nature is also gone. Therefore, Marx concludes, because proletariats by definition have to sell their labor, it is impossible for them to live the good life. With this, we have reached the conclusion of Marx's second major argument we encountered in our reading for today. At this point, then, we can see how the two arguments fit together, how, in other words, Marx's ideas about history are linked to his ideas about the good life. Okay, so remember that for Marx, modern society is made of bourgeois and proletariat, these two classes. However, modern society will eventually end with a proletariat revolution and a resulting classless society. Now, when we remember that for the proletariat, who, remember again, make up the vast majority of modern society, for these proletariat it is impossible to live the good life, we thus see that this coming revolution must be a good thing. Indeed, if what Marx has argued is correct, it is only through the revolution and resulting classless society that it becomes possible for proletariats to stop selling their labor and begin living the good life. To put it in even simpler terms, when we combine Marx's historical and ethical arguments, we see that Marx believes a classless society is both historically inevitable and ethically good. This ends our discussion of Marx. I hope it has raised a number of questions for you. First of all, I hope it has succeeded in making you think about the ways in which Marxism has been addressed both in communist and democratic countries and whether or not anyone has succeeded in addressing it appropriately. More importantly, I hope that Marx has succeeded in making you think about class as it exists in our society. Indeed, I hope Marx has showed you that class may in fact be an ethical concern, as some people may be denied the good life for no other reason than the class in which they find themselves.